This will be a very brief introduction to a fascinating man, U.G. Krishnamurti, who I can only describe as a kind of enlightened nihilist, someone who appears to have undergone what's known as spiritual enlightenment, while utterly rejecting everything spiritual, the concept of enlightenment, the quest for it, and the role of guru. His name came up during one of my conversations with Lucas Vos. There's a link to that video in the description below, in which we were discussing the differences between the Judeo-Christian aspiration for eternal individual existence and the Eastern aspiration for enlightenment, that is to say, freedom from the individual ego, understood as the cause of all suffering. I noted that this man, U.G. Krishnamurti, appears to have attained enlightenment, but warned people that they don't actually want it. U.G. was born in India in 1918 and died in Italy in 2007. He spent the first part of his life seeking enlightenment and practiced meditation and yoga for 7 years under the prominent spiritual teacher Swami Shivananda. Later, he formed a close association with another popular teacher, Jiddu Krishnamurti. Despite the name, there's no family relation between them. However, he became frustrated with these practices and teachers and came to feel the whole spiritual business was based on hypocrisy. After his marriage broke down, he separated from his family and led a penniless existence, wandering aimlessly in London and then Switzerland. Although he had let go of any overt attempt to achieve enlightenment, the question, what is that state, continued to burn away inside him. In Switzerland, a friend took him in to live with her. He began experiencing strange things, but didn't connect them to spirituality or enlightenment. Then one day, in 1967, his friends persuaded him to go to a talk by his old teacher, Jiddu Krishnamurti. As the other Krishnamurti described his way of being, U.G. realized, I am in that state. A new question arose for him, but how do I know that I am in that state? The following day was his 49th birthday. He was pondering this question of the previous day. Then suddenly the question and the state just disappeared. Something in him stopped. What he would call thought, that which constructs the self and ensures its continuity and seeks to preserve that sense of continuity forever. Suddenly it stopped working. Here's how U.G. described it. Quote, then thought cannot link up. The linking gets broken, and once it is broken, it is finished. Then it is not once that thought explodes. Every time a thought arises, it explodes. So this continuity comes to an end, and thought falls into its natural rhythm. End quote. This set off what U.G. called the Calamity, which was his term for the enlightenment experience. He used this term to emphasize that this is the end of the person, and because of the terrible physical torture it involved. Over the following 7 days, a series of profound changes came over him, affecting his mind and all his senses. I'll put a link to a book chapter that deals with this in the description, so you can read about it if you're interested. Several of his books, which are really just compilations by his friends, are freely available online. His position on intellectual property was true to character. He says, my teaching, if that is the word you want to use, has no copyright. You are free to reproduce, distribute, interpret, misinterpret, distort, garble, do what you like, even claim authorship without my consent or the permission of anybody. Anyway, on the 7th day, he went through a process of death, physical death, clinical death, as he described it. His hands and feet became cold. His body became stiff. His heartbeat and breathing slowed down. He used the metaphor of the aperture of a camera trying to close itself. Quote, so the aperture was trying to close itself, and something was there trying to keep it open. Then, after a while, there was no will to do anything, not even to prevent the aperture closing itself. Suddenly, as it were, it closed. End quote. After that, he didn't know what happened or how he came back to life. Then, on the 8th day, he experienced an unbearable rush of energy. Quote, I was sitting on the sofa and suddenly there was an outburst of tremendous energy, shaking the whole body, and along with the body, the sofa, the chalet, and the whole universe, as it were, shaking, vibrating. You can't create that movement at all. It was sudden. Whether it was coming from outside or inside, from below or above, I don't know. I couldn't locate the spot. It was all over. It lasted for hours and hours. I couldn't bear it, but there was nothing I could do to stop it. There was a total helplessness. This went on, day after day, day after day. End quote. Eventually his body settled into its new way of being, unshackled from the dominion of thought and the illusion of the self. From this time, it was as though he didn't have a self, and thought only activated when it was needed, then immediately ceased. Yuji had stumbled into what he would call the natural state, the innate intelligence of the body functioning just as it needed to, without the fears, cravings, and needless complications of thought. He was now what we all are, body, now producing intermittent but disconnected bursts of thought. In response to the environment, stimuli from the environment. Despite the extraordinary nature of his experiences, he explained them all in purely physical or physiological terms. He compared the human being to a robot or a computer. He said in reference to himself, "There is no one here, and I am just a dog barking." After his transformation, he gave only one formal talk. He never claimed the status of a teacher or guru, and continually insisted he was not superior to anyone else. More importantly, he continually insisted he had nothing to teach anyone else. The transformation he went through is not desirable, and even if it was, he couldn't get you any closer to it. In fact, every attempt to do this would only take you further and further away by fueling the mechanism of thought. Yuji insisted that it was not because of, but in spite of, his spiritual practices that he experienced the calamity. Nevertheless, people would flock to him, and he would hold informal conversations with them. Typically, this would involve negating everything they presupposed and the very questions they were posing. He considered religions worthless and abused all spiritual teachers. Though he denied having a coherent teaching, I think it's fair to describe his thought as a form of thorough nihilism. There is no God, no self, no real mind, just the biological organism, whose only interests are survival and reproduction. But even the physical organism isn't a fundamental reality, being continuous with the physical world around it. Ultimately, there are no individuals at all, no selves of any kind. Thought, a byproduct of the body, has come to dominate it and creates all sorts of apparent problems, generally messing with its otherwise smooth functioning. The body has an immense intelligence of its own, marvelously adapted to its actual needs. Thought generates a self, which is to say a sense of its own continuity, and becomes obsessed with perpetuating that apparent continuity. It fixates on the sensation of pleasure, which the body really doesn't want much of. Too much pleasure destroys its sensitivity. All spiritual endeavors flow from this. The mental demand for permanent pleasure culminates in insane religious conceptions like heaven or enlightenment. I'll play a couple of clips to give you a sense of what the man was like. These are both from an interview on Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove. But you can find countless videos and recordings of Yuji just by searching his name on YouTube. Here's the first clip.
Now, Yuji, you seem to be suggesting that there's just a little hair maybe separating all of us from enlightenment, and that hair is our fear of annihilation.
The fear you are talking about, have you ever experienced fear? At any time. Because, you see, what is fear after all? Where is that fear? What is fear?
Well,
the fear of something coming to an end.
Yeah.
The fear of you as you know yourself, you as you experience yourself coming to an end. So you do not want the fear to come to an end. If the fear comes to an end, you will drop dead here. Physical, clinical death will take place here. It is not in your interest to ask, demand the fear to come to an end. So you play with that, you see, fear. So you don't condemn it. Don't identify yourself with fear. Don't do this, you see. You become one with the fear. You become choicelessly aware. You live with the fear, you see. All these techniques, all the therapeutic cults that have come into the marketplace, each one trying to sell his own particular theory, is only perpetuating the fear and not trying to help you to free yourself from fear, because it is something which you do not want to free yourself from, and it is not in your interest that the fear should come to an end. So you do not want the fear to come to an end.
And do you experience fear?
No, the fear, there is nothing there to come to an end at all. Probably if you see a cobra there, I am not an innocent child, you see, you step back. So then you see the fear that you see it will kill you or it will kill somebody else is absent there. Then you take a walk with a cobra and sing songs with a cobra, and you will be surprised what a delightful creation, what a marvelous piece of creation that cobra is, and you will never hurt that, because hurting that is hurting yourself. Killing that cobra is killing yourself. And what gives you this situation where you are so ruthless and wipe out all these living organisms is the idea that you are superior and that the whole thing is created for your use, and that is why we have created this problem in this world. I am talking all the time.
Well, you were quoted once in a magazine article in India as saying that you thought perhaps a cabbage was more alive than a human being.
You see, do you know that you are alive?
I believe I do.
As long as you have a knowledge of that, you have no way of experiencing the living quality of that. Not that I know or that I experience, that I am a superior being. The demand to experience something living is impossible for the dead structure. The thought is dead. It is not a living thing. What gives you the illusion is that, you see, we are trying to invest thought with life. And we imagine that it is a living thing, but actually it is a dead thing, you see. It is about thought is dead. So a dead thing cannot capture something living. If by accident you step on a live wire, you are dead, you are finished. You see, only by accident you can step on, you see, touch life at a point where nobody touched before. And so you see, then from that moment onwards, what is living there expresses itself without the use of thought. So in that sense I say you will be more useful to nature dead than alive, because you are living in the world of ideas, you are living in the world of thoughts, you are putting ideas into your stomach and you are wearing names. So you are not living at all, you see.
It's as if you're saying that our ideas are like our clothing, like our hair or our fingernails. They're not living tissue.
No, they are not living at all. They are all dead ideas passed on to by somebody who has come out with his fantasies and ideas. You know, I watch many of your commercials.
And here is the second clip.
And I tried so hard. I looked everywhere. Nobody satisfied me. See, nobody satisfied my hunger to find out the answer. Is there any such thing as enlightenment? Was Buddha an enlightened man? Is that man who claims to be an enlightened man is an enlightened man? What is it that he has I don't have? Whatever he is telling me is false, and it is falsifying me. Be selfless. What the hell do you want me to be selfless? I am a selfish being to the very core of being. And you want me to be selfless. You see, it is that, you see, the idea of selflessness that has turned me into a selfless man. You are telling me that I should be free from anger. Why should I be free from anger? Anger is a tremendous outburst of energy. You are not dealing with the anger there. You are not dealing with pleasure. You are not dealing anything that you see that is happening there inside of me, I am interested in finding out whatever is there inside of me cannot be false. Whatever you are telling me is false. But somehow I didn't have the certainty to brush the whole thing aside. Maybe that fellow knows what he is talking about. Maybe he has something which I don't have. Nothing satisfied my hunger, you see. So then they give you a small piece of bread, you see, and then the brown bread, you see, the stone ground bread, nothing satisfied me. So what happened? The hunger burnt itself out. You see, the freedom that I wanted, you see, the very demand to be free is not there anymore for me. It's not that I have found the answer for that. You see, there is no self to realize. I have spent 49 years of my life searching for the self. It is not there. So they can all go. You see, now the certainty that I have, all that is false. It does not mean that I feel superior and place myself on a higher pedestal and tell myself you are the most superior of all that. Not for a moment. That is false, and I do not want that to falsify me. This certainty I have stumbled into is something which cannot be transmitted to somebody.
You say you stumbled into it, and you say it has nothing to do with this intense search.
Nothing. You see, the intensity is an emotional thing. The insights I had through these encounters with others strengthened and fortified the very thing that I was trying to free myself from. It did not help me anyway. So nothing I did helped me. So I have to use the word stumbled into, because I don't know how this dawned on me that there is nothing to understand, you see. That is not the instrument, and there is no other instrument. There is nothing to understand.
Well, would you have done just as well to have remained in
that
the
is
small village?
That is a hypothetical question, you see. I must admit that my contact with the West opened, you see, great horizons for me. And unfortunately, I studied both Eastern and Western philosophies thoroughly for my master's degree and psychology. But nothing helped me, because this question, the basic question, is there any such thing as mind? Why you are talking of silent mind? Why you are talking of the mutation of mind? There is no such thing as mutation of mind. There is nothing there to be transformed. There is nothing there to be changed. So why this talk of transformation, radical or otherwise? All that is absolute gibberish, absolute rubbish, poppycock, I said to myself.
Finally, I want to make a few reflections and pose a few questions. Yuji is fascinating because he appears to have undergone a transformation that is the goal of, at least, many of the Eastern religious traditions, yet he stripped it of all spiritual connotations. Could his experience be what the religions are actually talking about? Though they have clothed it in so much religious language, Yuji presents it to us as it really is, or so the argument would run. Likewise, the nature of reality, so far as we who have not undergone this transformation can understand it, the nature of reality is best reflected in Yuji's nihilistic philosophy rather than all the old spiritual abstractions. There's something disturbing in Yuji's experience. Here is a human being claiming not to be a self, not really to exist. Is this because this just is how reality is? There are, in fact, no selves. Reality speaks this fact to us through the now uninhabited physiological mechanism of a man like Yuji. This could very well be the case. Though Yuji rejected religion, there are undoubted similarities with other teachers and traditions, especially Buddhism, which holds that there are no selves and all is impermanence. Yuji warns us that we don't want enlightenment. How are we to take that, especially if it seems that we want it very much? Is it a kind of koan to guide us to or trick us into it? Yuji insists that it is not, that it really is a calamity, an agonizing end to the self. Why would I want to die? Does this reveal the inadequacy of the Eastern religions, that the end goal, which is actually achievable, is annihilation? A Western religion like Christianity, the claim would run, has an opposite goal, better, but also achievable, that is, eternal life. But could this disturbing quality be due to something else? If there are selves, then Yuji would seem to be suffering from mental illness. Indeed, his descriptions bear a resemblance to depersonalization, the clinical symptom of dissociation from oneself, the sense of not being real. There is also a resemblance to Cotard's syndrome, a more severe disorder in which a person actively denies that they exist. The absence of a religious structure around Yuji's enlightenment experience lays that type of experience bare for critical examination. If it is pathological, all so-called enlightenment may be pathological too. Yet the pathological interpretation of Yuji's experience doesn't quite fit. Could someone so deranged be so well-functioning? Indeed, if Yuji's and his followers' claims are true, even more well-functioning than the average person. While not pathological, perhaps some other kind of neurological change occurred. And yet, to complicate things further, there are elements in his account of his transformation that push against a purely physical interpretation, in spite of his insistence on this. In the account of his life that I've linked to in the description, he mentions in passing that prior to his calamity, he had acquired certain psychic powers. In Indian religions, these are the siddhis, that one is understood to gain as one progresses in spiritual disciplines and nears enlightenment. Yuji says he didn't play around with them, which is the correct approach for someone seeking enlightenment. For some reason, when he was young, his grandparents believed he had come within inches of enlightenment in his previous life. And then the experience of the calamity itself, all that energy surging through him unbearably. This bears remarkable resemblance to the Kundalini phenomenon in Hinduism, wherein the coiled snake of energy at the base of the spine rises to the crown of the head, a process that accompanies enlightenment. With all this, there is a temptation, one that proved irresistible to many of his followers, to think that all his abrasive nihilism was something quite calculated, a Zen-like tool to shock people into realization. That Yuji knew very well his status as an enlightened being, his role as a teacher, and the deep continuity between his realization and that of countless sages and saints who came before him, but that he adjusted his language to what the time and culture required. Or, not to go quite so far, we could suppose that here an essential spiritual reality expressed itself through the jaded and skeptical psychological structure of Yuji, as the same luminous insight has been expressed in many ways before, theistically, pantheistically, non-theistically, for instance. Here it is expressed through a nihilistic language and personality. Whatever the case, Yuji truly is a fascinating figure. My only advice would be that if you delve into him, stay grounded. Avoid him if you have a tendency to depersonalization. Stay immersed in life and connected to others. Take his advice. Don't let his own abstractions falsify you. Maybe it's good to remain on this side of enlightenment.